Hi, Ron. I'm Francois Servranckx. I'm the founder of Green Gooding, a circular economy rental business based in Brooklyn. I came from the humanitarian world. I used to be a head worker for a couple of years in
Hmm.
Africa and then was transferred to the US and was always interested in like learning more about, how can we limit our impact on the environment. And that's kind of why I used my skills to start Green Gooding a few
Yeah,
years ago.
very cool. So I also saw that you have kind of a communications background when I was, doing my obligatory stalking. So I share that as well. I've done HR, I've done communications, and it's really fascinating to see someone kind of kindred in that space. So could you just start by telling me a bit about how, you leveraged your background and your curiosity to get into green gooding? Like what got you into I guess the circularity bug, if you will?
Yeah, so I started my career working for different NGOs, in particular in Africa, for a couple of years. And after a couple of years, 10 years almost, I was transferred to the US. I took a job with Doctors
Hmm.
Without Borders here in the US. And when I spent a couple of years with, in Africa, I noticed something that we don't necessarily see very commonly anymore in richer country, which is that,
Hmm.
when it's too expensive to buy things. You just, reuse, you repair. Things need to get running longer,
Right.
essentially. And when I arrived here in New York, and it's the same thing in France in many aspects. It's not just a US thing. I noticed that we are much more into buying, using, and then getting rid of stuff rather than trying to fix or reuse things. And again, I think it was not necessarily by choice that many people do this around the world. It's simply because the economic model is better
Yep.
here to buy and in other places to fix. But I think we should not forget that our grandparents, our ancestors, in many ways,
Yeah.
had much more reflex to, fix stuff and to keep them running, and we've kind of lost this essentially.
Yeah.
Um, in terms of like transferable skills, I think, I can't point to one specific skill, I would say, because I think the main one really is about being curious.
Yeah.
It's true, you have to do it when you work in communication, you have to do it when you run any type of project, you need to troubleshoot and come up with like solution and so on. So I think this is really what's guiding me even to this day with green gooding is, to remain curious, to think about, oh, why is this not working? What could we do instead? And then try to knock at people's door and figure out and listen to what they say and try to connect the dots essentially. So I think that's the main one. Another one is probably, and again, it's not specific to me. I think it applies to many other people. Is also to be resilient,
Yeah.
and that's something I had the opportunity to witness in many places where people were facing difficult situations. Right, it's like to not give up, to like always find options and solutions. And I think that's kind of what's driving me through, I think, to push Green Gooding forward.
Right. So yeah, I completely agree with what you're saying about it's funny because if you have parents or grandparents who lived through the depression or different eras of time, these are just ingrained behaviors. And in some of my family members who kind of grabbed that passed down energy, you can see the way that they actually treat a lot of their everything in their life is really oriented around that idea that this thing we might not be able to get any more of it, maybe it'd be rationed or something like that. And so I think that your point is raised, and I'm hearing it a lot in circular spaces, is making sure that we recognize that it's not like a developed nation coming up with this brand new idea of keeping things in use as long as possible, that we're borrowing from our ancestors and from current day folks who are struggling economically, who you mentioned don't have the economic model to just go buy something else. So I thought that was really well said. um, and I'm curious, did you do before green gooding, were you playing out some of these models in your life? Were you kind of like participating in reuse models in other areas, or sort of how did that come about?
I would say I was more like a witness to things rather than
Yeah.
an actor. I guess I saw, many people fixing things. And also, I think in Europe, especially in the Netherlands and in Belgium, there's a big community of like, repair cafes. And I had
Yeah,
the
repair
chance to see
cafes.
some of them. So I tried to go to some of them. There are a few in New York City, actually.
Hmm.
It's not very, common, I would say.
Right.
So I got to see, folks who live in that kind of like space. It's one of them. I think like, people from a certain generation as well. I've seen kind of the beginning of recycling. I think, I think when I was a kid, we would not recycle anything, but now way more things are being recycled,
Totally.
which is good to see, for sure. And I think I just wanted to, to see to play a bit with the different things that I'd seen in other places and to see whether we could potentially, try some of these in New York.
Yeah, I also like how you're framing that because this is something I've talked with some of my friends about when it comes to innovation. It seems like when people think about innovators, they think about Steve Jobs and they think, oh, wow, like somebody was super visionary and they saw something that nobody else saw. And I just don't think it really happens like that. I like to think that innovation's more of an organic process where even Steve Jobs, like, he didn't come up with the computer, he came up with the handheld version, right? Like there was a riff off of something that he was playing with. So I'm curious what you think about that when it comes to being an innovator, which you are. How do you define what it means to innovate on something? What is that process like for you, that iteration? Yeah, what does it mean to innovate?
I mean, I think innovation has been, different things for different people, but for me, it's kind of like to challenge the status quo in some ways, right?
Hmm.
To being told, we've been told, no, that's the way we do things and it can
This is how it
change.
works.
And it's like, well, maybe not actually, but I think it's important to take this into account as well because the risk also is to build something that nobody needs or nobody wants essentially, right? So I
Hmm.
think that's also why for me, and I'll get a bit more into this, but I think one of the key factors when I started this was really to identify whether people would even want this, right? Because
Yeah,
if you think about it, I think in terms of, why is it that people today, would rather buy something on Amazon versus than, renting something, at a shop locally?
yep,
I mean, often it's pure convenience, I get it. We're all busy. We have a lot of things to do, and if you spend an hour or 2 hours doing something instead of something else, then you're not gonna like it. You're probably not
yeah,
gonna do it again. Price, I mean, it's obviously it's also
sure.
New York City. It's pretty expensive city, but we know also that a lot of people are a bit more challenged in terms of economic these days. So you need to make sure that this is affordable. And then if you can add a dose of fun, I think, of excitement, that can be a big game changer, especially I think for sustainability solution. I think,
Yeah,
with to move beyond
the doom and
the
gloom
doom
and the
and
you
gloom
should do this
exactly.
because you have to do this, and instead, like, how can you feel hopeful and engaged in doing something sort of fun?
Totally. I don't believe much in the power of guilt to get people to do stuff. I think we've all been made guilty of a lot of things, and we definitely need to recall other things we've done in the past. But still, I think, I don't think that's the best driver for people. So playing with all of this, basically having, this kind of like key criteria at end, I was like, okay, let's try to see if it's even something people would do and develop a prototype and learn from it, essentially see what works, what doesn't work, what could or to pivot and so on.
Well, let me hear a little bit more about that because I think that a lot of people who are thinking about being innovators themselves in some capacity, the idea that they would face rejection in some sense while they're sorting out this, it just feels really heavy. So I'm curious from your perspective, where were some of the early maybe misses or like we don't have to call them failures, but we tried this, it really didn't work. Could you talk a little bit about that iterative process?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like learning a new language, and I can speak about this. Like, even though I have a very strong accent, no, it's not that I don't pay attention to it, but I'm like, the point is to be able to talk and to understand each other. So if you learn any other new language and you don't feel comfortable speaking because you feel like people are going to judge you and
Hmm,
speak it, you're just not gonna learn it, right?
you're just never going to learn.
You're never gonna progress. You're never gonna make, you need to make mistake to progress. So I think, obviously everybody has a different self-confidence and image of him or herself. But I would say yes, I think be ready to be seen at first as like someone who's like an interesting but yet unfeasible idea, or it's never gonna
Yeah.
work. Or people have been, the cool thing is that when you work on sustainability and when you work in that space, people are generally super nice and there's a very collaborative mindset
Yeah.
in general. So I think between people who work on stuff like that, I think there's definitely a lot of like, help and support. But yes, I think it's more the main challenge is with yourself, right? Yes, it's not only to believe in it, but it's also like, there's gonna be probably much more lows than highs.
Yeah.
And you need to get ready with that. It's gonna go worse before it gets
It gets
better.
better.
And you need some breakthrough. You need to put a bit of, thing in the horizon that drives you through the day to say,
Hmm.
okay, I know it's not making enough money. I don't have the technology. A lot of different things could happen, basically. But you need to really believe in this and give it time. I think that's one thing I didn't really realize at first. It's my first time starting a company, so I was maybe a bit naive at first, thinking that the minute I would start, I would be overwhelmed with demand and everybody would want to do it,
Yeah.
and that's not what happened.
Yeah, tell me a little bit more about those earlier days. So, what was the model in the very beginning and how has it changed?
Yeah, so first of all, I should say, everybody is in different situation, but I was lucky enough to have a full-time job. I didn't need to
Yeah,
rely on screen going at the very beginning.
nice.
And I mean, also a father of two young kids, so I need to like split, find the
Yeah.
right balance so that I would not dedicate all my time to it either. But basically, yeah, I kind of went step by step. I put it this way. First, really was to see whether there was a demand for it. Back to the point I was making about building something that is useful and that could
Hmm.
be potentially profitable at some point if there's demand for it. So at the very beginning, I had this idea in mind. I actually talked to someone in France who had a rental business for small appliances, a slightly different market. She's still actually working. She's doing pretty well, but she's targeting small businesses basically.
Hmm.
So leasing essentially refurbished small appliances to law offices, medical offices, and so on.
Cool.
And I was like, wow, this is cool. I love it.
Yeah.
I love to do this, but for individuals in Brooklyn.
Yeah.
And of course, thinking about what are the pain points for any resident of New York City? What are the main things we face every day that makes it a bit harder? And I mentioned price is one of them. We
Hmm.
spend a lot of money on rent, so on other things
Yep.
or restaurants. So there's not so much extra money we can spend on things on services like this.
And I would imagine space.
And
Does
space
that
is
play into
definitely, you
it?
got
Yeah.
it. Space is definitely the other one. Basically, we just don't have so much space to store stuff, and that's kind of why motivated me even to begin. This is why basically, when I saw all the things people were getting rid of in the street every day, I was like,
Yeah.
clearly we're not doing this the right way. There's a better way uh, to 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 use these things basically rather than buying them and throwing them away. So space and money, and then time is the last one I mentioned. People are busy and have a lot of things to do during the day here. So with all of this in mind, I was like figuring out, okay, what can we develop that could work well? And the solution initially, which has actually not evolved that much. I mean, many aspects have changed, but the core principle is still the same, is to provide basically on-demand service for small appliances around the corner from where you live.
Yeah.
So when you need something, you can book directly on your phone or in a shop and go pick it up there and bring it home. So the very beginning, where I really spent trying to even just build that system, right? Because if even if you want to measure the demand, you could do a survey and talk to people, but there's a big difference between people
What
saying
people say what they would do and what they actually
exactly,
end up doing.
like,
Yeah.
yeah, I'd love to do this, or
Sure.
definitely, and then it's like, okay, so when is someone going to actually run something
Yeah.
here? So this is why basically I got lucky. I met someone who was just opening a shop here in Brooklyn, in Greenpoint, a no container shop, so pretty aligned in terms like
Hmm.
mission, a sustainability mission. And she gave me my an opportunity. She told me, okay, you can, here's some space you can use, you can try it out. So I put a
That's
shelf, I
awesome.
bought a few pieces of equipment second hand, found a way to find a software to connect to a website so that
Mhm.
people could book and pay, and that's how it started, essentially.
So what was well, you said that it wasn't just like a ton of, it wasn't all of New York City, right? Coming to the company right at first, but what's the ramp up been like? So that's what it was like in the early days. You're kind of 4 years or so in now. What does it look like today?
Yeah, so the first night, the night before the opening, 3 years ago, I was ready to actually buy more things. And I was like, okay,
Yeah.
well, clearly I don't have enough equipment, and people will want this tomorrow by midday. I won't have anything anymore, and it's going to be tricky. It took 1 month for one person to rent something. So that was basically a bit of a wake up, call.
Yeah,
Like clearly, you need to get the word out, and you need to, and with not much budget, I didn't have much marketing budget. So it's like,
sure.
okay, the only thing I can do is myself, get like print flyers, stand next to these appliances in a shop as long as I can, and explain to people what this is about. Going to farmers market, trying to attend different kind of community events here in the neighborhood, and to get more and more people aware about this. And slowly, and also I think because so much of it is linked to how close this is to where you live,
Hmm.
I also needed to build a bit more of a network of locations, basically. So the way it works is essentially I partner with small businesses.
Hmm.
I provide equipment, I provide access to the platform. I do the digital customer service in case people have questions and so on. And we share revenues, right?
Great.
But you need to build this network. So it's always a mix between getting the word out so that people who live nearby existing location know about it, try it, and hopefully tell their friends or families about it. But also extending the network so that it gets closer to other potential customers' home. So now, 3 years later, we are at 6 locations in New York City, four in Brooklyn, which is still the stronghold right now
Yeah.
for Green Gooding. One since June in Manhattan, in Hell's Kitchen. So, and we have about one rental per day. Um,
Wow.
so we are slowly,
It's a
we're almost there.
lot.
I
That's
think
a lot different from one a month. I mean,
actually I
that's
just
a
got an
great
order
ramp
as
up.
we spoke, and I think I'm gonna give you the reference of this order. I think it's order number. Let me drummer.
Yes.
1963.
Wow.
So getting close
That's
to a
incredible.
thousand. So we know that can work. We know
Yeah.
also understand a bit better the business model with shops, because I think the one thing I wanted to say as well is that, and I think that applies to a lot of like sustainability solution and circular economy solution. It's also to get the economic right, right?
Hmm.
So. And by economics, I mean, the right price for the
Yeah.
customers so that people feel like, it's something they're happy to do. There's no like a premium compared to, let's say, organic food versus non-organic food, which we know
Yep.
is it's a big limitation for a lot of people. But we also to make sure that this business makes money.
Yep.
Because we know all, sensitive or
Solutions
difficult.
aren't going to take hold if we're relying on nonprofit models or something like that
Right,
to
grants
advance these
come and
solutions.
go. We've seen it unfortunately many times before. Entire project have to close if once grants dry up. So I didn't want to be in that situation,
Yeah.
especially coming from the nonprofit sector.
Hmm.
And also, I want people to copy me. I
Yeah.
want people to be able to say, you
Get
know what,
excited
there's
about this
something
model.
right. There's something to be done here. I think we could totally do it. And whether you want to do it for sustainable purposes or not, actually, at some point,
Sure.
it doesn't really matter. It
Matter.
just, it's a
It's
new
good
way of
business.
consuming, and it definitely reduces our impact on the planet, on the environment. And if people make a good living out of it, perfect.
Yeah. I love that. That's brilliant. Well, now I'm curious. So these are the things that you're really excited about. What else are you excited about these days? Is it the growth of Green Gooding? Are you looking to move into new locations? Are you excited about other models that you've heard in the circular space? The reason why I ask is also because kind of a weird time, and there are a lot of people that probably don't feel a lot of excitement about this time. So I'm curious, like, what's bringing you energy right now, and what ideas are really latching on for you? What are you excited about?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a optimistic, person by nature. So I'm always trying to find, the silver lining in moving
Yep.
forward and so on. I get it today, if you look, at, the news when it comes to sustainability and regulation and so on, it can look a bit bleak. But, there are examples like Green Gooding, like other, companies that are actually making a difference and going forward, I think.
Hmm.
And I think a big reason why, and it's kind of also why I'm happy to do it this way myself, is that whether, regulation are changing or not, that doesn't really matter to me. This is a business that can still go on this way, is definitely one element. So again, building a sustainable business
Yeah.
that can, weather storms, basically. And yes, it's a storm, but at some point the weather will get better. But so I think it's one of them. I think I'm also very, I'm in my bubble in many ways, right? I'm like, I talk
Yeah.
to people who love this service, who give me like very positive feedback and so on. So things, seem pretty good. But I see a lot of like still a lot of excitement from people about, this kind of solution. I think it's just a better realization by many that this is what we need to do and this is the
Yeah.
right way forward. I think that's not going to change, whoever is, in power or not. This is happening, I think. Um, Also, I think it's a bit more healthy than it used to be in some ways. I think I've worked in sustainability for a couple of years now, and I think we were maybe making some claims that were not always totally
Yeah.
true, or and I get it. I mean, I did it. I'm guilty of this as well. So also, well, I think it's also a bit more of a reality check. I think
Yeah.
as we speak, so there's going to be readjustment, and it's never easy. But I think we see a lot of like cool project, cool things moving forward. Um, and I think, as I mentioned earlier, I think maybe in the past you could get funding if you had like a good sustainable solution, but you didn't fully have like the economics
The bit.
figure out.
Yeah.
Not
And now
anymore.
you sort of have to. And so that's
Right. No, it's
also
kind of the
better.
opposite. And that's kind of the way even when I talk to people and to potential investors, no, it's kind of more the way I frame it.
Hmm.
Sometimes I don't even talk about sustainability. I talk about the market. So
Yep.
the on-demand, market for short-term rental of like small appliances, equipment, sport gears, which is also an area I'm going to try to evolve toward, is $20 billion in the
Oh,
US. So it's not small, and I think there's so many things we could do better, I think, in that space. And I'm excited about this. I think there's a lot of potential here. There's a lot of excitement, and that's kind of what I'm looking forward, and that's kind of where I want to take Green Gooding next,
yeah,
essentially.
is into that energy. Well, I feel it. I feel it when I'm speaking with you, and also it's part of what drew me to the circular economy space as well, because I mean, so I'm from the south of the United States, and I think that there's not a lot of natural interest in some of the sustainability topics in the way that there are maybe in other states. However, EPR legislation is actually something that's coming to the fore for them because they're running out of landfill space. And so
Hmm.
it's been really interesting to be a part of this shift from, a lot of people who had natural intrinsic excitement around sustainability for whatever reason, and then folks who maybe didn't belong in that same camp. Um, and now those voices are both maybe for different reasons coming together in this space. And that in and of itself creates some additional economic opportunity. So I'm curious on that front when you're thinking about how to bring in maybe voices that aren't as heard in the circular economy or in sustainability. How have you seen your role in elevating some of those voices, those perspectives that maybe, aren't the typical sustainability person that you might see or think about?
Hmm. I think the first way to do it is really to not necessarily make sustainability the main entry point, because
Yeah,
unfortunately it's become a bit of a
like a
dividing
non
wall
sequitur. Yeah, for a lot of, yeah.
today. But at the end of the day, I think I believe most people want the same thing. You want job security, you want safety, you want actually a clean environment. I don't think anyone would argue like,
Yeah.
it's not, you don't want to live next to, a polluting plant or a waste management plant. So I think we have more in common than we think we do, for sure. But also I think we know we need to focus on like arguments that again rally everyone on. I think job creation. I mean, circular economy are local jobs. I think we don't necessarily talk much about it, but I mean, even if something is produced abroad, and many things are produced abroad, I think once it's brought into the country, if it's into reuse or rental business like mine, basically I support local jobs because people,
Yeah.
would clean and prepare these machines between rentals. And then if they break, have someone who can fix stuff. So a lot of like local jobs, I mean, circular economy jobs are local jobs. And I think
Yeah.
everybody is looking for more jobs
Local jobs.
opportunity today.
I love your point there.
Uh,
And what you just mentioned too earlier, that your early partners in your business were also local jobs. It's you are, revenue sharing with your neighbor in a sense, which in that way is also really cool.
Totally. Another element I mentioned earlier as well is price. I think, again, I
Hmm.
think, with the price of good increasing, I think, it becomes more valuable to
Hmm.
rent where you need only when you need rather than to buy it simply because you might not be able to afford it. And again, back to, many of the issues that I heard of what people, think about today. I think we know price inflations are key element. And again, I think this is across, the divide. I think everybody can agree that, if we can, get things for a lower amount of money, it's better, I think, in many ways. So I think finding almost all those communities are important, basically, and not necessarily starting straight away again with like, this is so
This is the
simple. I
right thing to
know.
do. And right.
I know why I'm doing it. I know some of the impact measure, for example. I think, I mean, this is already about 2 months ago, I calculated this, but we kind of potentially prevented the production of more than 48 tons of carbon dioxide
Wow.
simply because, when something is used multiple times by different users, basically it's much less units being produced in the first place. And when we talk about pollution, we often talk about pollution at two levels, which is during usage. So like think about electric cars versus
Hmm.
gas powered cars, or the waste when it comes to
End
disposal.
of life. Yeah.
We don't often talk about pollution, sorry, at production level.
Mm.
Uh, and that varies. I'm not going to make like a blanket statement about this is the most important part, but often that is the part of where basically, if you look at the life cycle indeed of a product, this is often where the most pollution is emitted. If you can stop that, if you can limit this, you can have a big
A
impact. So
big
I know why I'm
difference.
doing it, but that's not necessarily the argument I push forward when I talk to potential business partners or
Yeah,
investors.
totally. Um, So I guess my last question is what's next for you? And I know that you mentioned some sports equipment, some other potential models that you're working on. What do you think is the biggest barrier that you're looking at when you think about what's next? And how are you thinking and dreaming about um, meeting that challenge?
Yeah, so in the long term, my vision is, for Green Gooding to become a leader in the US in like,
Yeah,
short-term rental, similar to what some other website you could think about where, you would find everything in one place. You want to, book an hotel room or apartment or something somewhere for vacation. There are some well-known website where you can find everything in one place, even if that comes from different vendors. So that's kind of where I want to bring Green Gooding in the next few years, basically like a central location where if you travel across the country and you go somewhere and you need something, you
you know
can look
there's a green
for,
gooding there you can go to.
you can go to this platform, you can find this available, you can find what you want available there. Obviously, to get there, there are many steps before that. And the first one, and I'm working on it right now, I put a team together. So we have 6 people in the team. I'm the only person full time right now. Other people are still doing this beside their their jobs, but as revenues and investment increase, we will hopefully have more people working full time. But basically now we're developing our own technology because essentially initially I was doing beside my job, bootstrapping it basically, but also
Mhm.
trying to not spend too much. And it's very easy to spend a lot of money on
Yeah,
technology. So right now, finally, we have a great guy who's developing the platform, and in a few weeks, months, basically, we'll be able to have our own platform that will solve some of the issues we currently face with the existing model we have. And
amazing.
that platform will allow individuals to come to start listing their own items on the platform. So
Oh,
let's say you
wow.
own something, you could put it for rent there. And that platform could also bring existing rental businesses that could, put their inventory on there as well.
On the
So
on the site.
going toward this vision of, one place, one-stop shop for all rental option and solution in your area or in your town. So that's where we are. I think it's becoming more like a startup kind of like process in many ways, right? So, putting the vision together, joining an accelerators or incubators.
Mhm.
Actually, next week we're starting like a pre-accelerators. It's called the Founder University. By launch is
Congratulations.
actually based in Austin, Texas,
Oh,
and
really? Okay.
so it's virtual, but it's cool. And basically trying to basically present ourselves as like a startup with high potential in the on-demand market space essentially. So that's kind of the big picture for green building.
Well, I'm excited for you. This has been such a fun conversation, and I just feel so energized by everything that you're working on. Um, I appreciate the time, and